Our next speaker is a visual storyteller who demystifies how things work. His books, The Way Things Work and The Way We Work, are illustrated by elegant drawings, wry humor, and clear descriptions of the simplest and most complex structures, machines, and body parts. He was awarded a prestigious MacArthur Fellowship, and 5 of his titles have been made into PBS programs. To quote Time magazine, "What he draws is better than any other pen and ink illustrator in the world." Ladies and gentlemen, we're in for a visual treat. Here's David Macaulay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That quote haunts me whenever I hear it, and I'll explain why in a second. There are a lot of complicated things we've talked about today, and it may be difficult, it has been for me, to sort of work my way through the graphs and charts and the scale of the problems that you're being encouraged to think about and to participate in solving. So I wanted to do something simple. I thought we would just simply build a Gothic cathedral and relax a little bit. What makes this a little more complicated and interesting for me is that I did my first Gothic cathedral in 1972. On Thursday, I turned in 40 new drawings for the new cathedral. Now, having heard the guy in Time magazine say that, about pen and ink illustrator, it may seem a little bizarre to leave those illustrations behind, but 37 years have passed. I've learned a few things, and I thought it would be fun to take on that project again. So let's just do some comparisons here. Here's the original title page of Cathedral. There's my view of the city, way out of scale. The houses are too small, they're too close together. It looks like Disneyland. This is the new title page. The drawings are all in color, so you'll have no trouble recognizing the old from the new. And I decided I'd like to get a little more personal in the way this information was presented. Here's a dazzling spread. I mean, they don't get better than this. There's nothing to look at, really. So the new spread looks like this. Life in this little medieval town of Choutreux, which I invented in which to build the castle. And the introduction will go down the right-hand side. So you're already into town. This is a pure 1960s, I moved it into the early 70s kind of drawing of the chapter. These are the guys who decide where the money goes and contribute a lot of that money. The new drawing is the chapter and the bishop meeting the architect in the ruins of the cathedral, which was damaged by fire, probably lightning or something like that. So we have a major problem. Here you are in France around 1220. All the big cities around you are building these fantastic new Gothic cathedrals, and your old building has just burned down, and you've been wanting to replace it, but you feel sort of attached to it. But once it's gone, you have no choice. So you jump on the bandwagon and become another of these cities building these fantastic monuments. Workers, you got to have workers, so I do workers. And this is a kind of a reworked workers. What I've added, though, in the lower right-hand corner for those of you in management is the laborers. And they look like a pretty nice group. You need many, many more of those in a way than the master craftsman, because somebody's got to move those pieces of stone around. In the upper right-hand corner is the blacksmith shop, which is already operating. I need to present the plan of the building, of course, and I need to present a cross-section and an elevation. This is the most sort of engineering part of the new book. I've made every effort to avoid that kind of image where possible, which I did not do back in 1973, because having studied architecture for 5 years, cross-sections and elevations were a sort of normal way for me to communicate, but it's not so normal for regular folk. Anyway, here's the site being cleared. Here's the site being cleared in the new book. There are the remains of the old cathedral. You need wood, you need a lot of wood, and you better start collecting that wood right away, because you're going to have to build machinery and scaffolding, never mind the timbers for the roof, which will probably come from Scandinavia. So I rethought that approach to chopping down forests and woods, and decided that as you chop down the forest, you basically are clearing away the imagery on this double-page spread, as opposed to looking at the whole thing from the air as you fly over it. The problem with looking at things from the air is you don't get engaged in it. You don't really become part of the process. Here you're at least there, probably hiding, because you're going to have to chop down another tree. Here's the quarry, the original quarry. Here's the new quarry. Lots of workers scattered around, worker sheds and so on and so forth. This is a more airborne shot, but it's quite an interesting complex, so I wanted to give you a sense of that. Everything that is chopped down in the woods and comes from the quarry or quarries eventually ends up at the town port, which looked like this, a couple of ships. Not much going on, pretty quiet port, given that the town is in the process of building a cathedral. Everything has to fit through that gate. Now, the scale here is completely wonky. This is like yellow submarine scale stuff. It doesn't satisfy my architectural needs nowadays to be a more precise presenter of this kind of information. So here's the port again. It's still quiet. It's a Sunday. Everybody's at one of the parish churches because they no longer have a cathedral. But there's the road up to the top of the hill where the cathedral will be built. And the rest of the town is sort of suggested. Here's the cross-section. This is a whole page of cross-sections. This is deadly. This is about foundations. I'm talking about foundations and how deep they are and so on and so forth. And there's nothing in this spread that would get you interested in the idea of foundations. This is a huge construction project, all of which will be buried. So I decided to rethink it. Those are the foundation holes for the piers and the buttresses of the new cathedral, just in one section of one side. The bishop is blessing the stone and hoping for the best. And here are the foundations. And these pyramids of stone, as I said, go down about 25 feet, will bring you to a base level upon which you can then build the piers of the church and so on. The choir end of the church looks like this with its radiating chapels, and you can see the piers. And that funny little thing that looks like a barn in the middle of it all is a roof protecting the crypt of the old cathedral, which will be incorporated into the new cathedral. You don't want to have to move those bodies and things like that. Keep it all in its place. Then you can start building the piers, these towers, which will support the walls, which will sort of enclose the glass and eventually support the vaulting and the roof itself. There's my earlier version. These are the kinds of details I put in because it used up pages really quickly. I want to, on the left-hand side is the pier. You can see it's filled with concrete. That's technically inaccurate. On the right-hand side, there's a spiral staircase built against the wall, but it's useless. And they didn't use chains between the outer and inner walls to reinforce the concrete. So I was way off, in other words, but I was doing my best. Okay, so now we can build the piers with the new approach. And there's the top of the foundation in the upper right-hand corner. And as you move down to the bottom, you can see the thing growing and the need for scaffolding. And as the walls get higher, of course, you need more and more scaffolding. In the background, you see the tracery for one of the stone windows that's being inserted into the wall as the wall is being built. Eventually, you get to a level where the outer wall reaches the top, its topmost height, its highest point. The inner wall will continue up through the triforium, all the way up to the clear story with the big windows, and eventually up to the vaulting. I still want diagrams, but I decided when I needed a diagram, when I wanted to label things and let you know where you are, that I would make it part of the drawing, not have this isolated little thing in a box that looks like a piece of information, separate and apart from the story I'm trying to tell. So the town on the left, the nave growing on the right, and you can see they're now reaching the clear story level on the right-hand side. You can see at that point, too, the scaffolding is no longer going to be built from the ground. It's simply too impractical. The wood isn't, the wood's too expensive. It will never be long enough, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can see the vaulting of the aisle right in front of you, and that will be labeled. Another sort of dry approach to this whole process, the centering that will support the stone arches that will support the vaulting, and a sort of a keeping you up-to-date diagram. Here's the centering being put into place between the buttresses, these heavy, massive blocks of stone, which by their sheer weight divert the outward thrust of the vaulting, the arch-shaped vaulting, divert it down into the ground, into the foundation, so that it doesn't bring the whole thing down. A process drawing. I did 6 or 7 of these in this book, always from the same point of view, and I decided not to do that again this time. Glass blowing. I mean, you don't have glass. I mean, half the thing is glass. I did it all in one drawing, blowing glass at the top and then cutting it up and putting it into pieces. And I decided to give that a whole different approach. So you can sort of watch glass coming out of the furnace and take it through 3 different processes, whether you're producing a round piece of glass or a cylinder piece of glass, which will be split open into a flat piece. It all gets loaded onto a cart, taken to a workshop, where using plans or drawings on the table, you can cut the pieces accurately, and then with lead, you put them together, and then you build your stained glass window. So that's a little bit more of a worthy tribute to stained glass, which is such an important part of this process. And the glass goes in, once the masons are finished, the glass will start going in right away. It may seem a little premature, but they want to start using these spaces if they can. So anyway, this is the drawing, the new drawing of the choir of the cathedral, one of the windows in place, and a little workshop used during the winter when most people have gone home because you can't pour cement or lay mortar and stone in the winter, it will crack. A dramatic drawing of the choir completed with its buttresses. The new drawing, less dramatic, but I think more powerful in a sort of an understated way. This is, as I said, a 37-year difference between these drawings. We now need to build the roof because you can't build vaulting without a roof first to protect it. So we need to hoist these timbers to the top. The early drawing, the new drawing, where I spent a lot more time trying to follow the actual connections between the timbers so you can see what holds things together. And it's all sort of in there. There's the choir, pretty much finished. And the buttresses are now finished. The flying buttresses are now finished that connect the buttresses to the main upper wall. Here's the new drawing of the flying buttresses to show you how the water is channeled that runs off the roof across the top of the flying buttress to this little holding tank and out through the mouths of gargoyles onto the roof below, and it will go out through another set of gargoyles onto the people below. Here's that great wheel, which is needed to start raising big pieces of stone to the height of the vault construction. Here's the wheel being lifted inside the new drawing. Here's the wheel in place, two guys inside it lifting a piece of centering, and a winch being worked by the guys closer to us. Now you're up in the roof. As much as possible, I want you to be part of this process and not a sort of traveler at some safe distance, because there's no takeaway from that. You don't really, you know the information, but you don't necessarily feel it as well as I think you might need to. A sequence of drawings that shows the construction of the vault, which I've simplified into this sequence. Starting in the upper left, you can see the wooden centering, then the stone arches on top of the centering, and then these pieces of wood called lagging, or little frames actually, between the centerings, upon which you build your stone roof, which you then cover with cement, concrete, basically about 4 inches thick. And then once the centering has been pulled down, you bring in some lighter scaffolding. Now remember, these guys are about 90 feet above the floor. The ground, I should say. The vault goes up another 30 feet. And that's the top of the walls. Then we start the roof. I mean, the roof went up another 50 feet. So, and they're painting the lines to make them more perfect. They're doing that because God will see it if it's messy, So that's their thinking. So there's the choir. Work stops because they've run out of money. This happened a few times. And once the choir is finished, though, and I thought this was kind of interesting, they completely wall off the entire structure so that they can begin to use that. That becomes the church. It's operating. The transept is the next thing to be built. The transept contains another rose window, or a rose window, fancy sculptural panels over the doorway. Here's the new transept, the cross, basically, the arms of the cross, at which point you can build a spire. I decided that the spire would be mostly sky and less spire because there was something more powerful about seeing just how far they still had to go. And they weren't going to get there, but the effort to reach the heavens with this 150-foot tall structure. The bishop dies, never really sees the spire. The early drawing, now still from that same point of view, and you've been watching this thing grow. The new drawing from in town, where after 50 years of work, you would think people might be perhaps a little less concerned about what's happening at the cathedral. So I thought, I'll just focus on town life for a little while and remind the reader that this is going on in the middle of a thriving community. But we can see the spire now, and we can see that all that's missing is the nave is done, are the towers. There are many, many pieces of sculpture that will be created for the tower. This is an apprentice stonecutter who has just, as you can see, taken the finger off one of the statues, and his master sculptor on the right-hand side is not so pleased with that sound of a falling finger. Anyway, there's our finished cathedral from 1973. Here's the facade growing, sculpture being installed, painted, magnificently painted or gaudily painted, depending on your point of view. And the towers are growing on either side of this facade. We need to have bells, so I want to show you how bells are made and how bells are cast and all that. So it's in a very simple sort of diagrammatic way. And now we can finish the facade. The bell ringers are here at work. And again, half diagram, which is why I left the color out, and half full color. And as the bells are ringing, the whole community is being drawn to the cathedral for this ceremony of dedication. And you can see in this early version, the light streaming in from the north, which is one of the first miracles to be performed in this cathedral. So I managed to fix it this time. So here's the new drawing of the cathedral during the ceremony, the light streaming in and so on and so forth, from the right side this time. And the original sort of ending drawing, grand finale, conclusion is replaced by this drawing, again, to sort of put you there, not to knock you out with either the sort of design of the page so much or the technique, but to connect you with the community of which this structure has become, or is to remain for 600 years so far, an integral part. Now, it's based on the cathedrals of northern France, and I freely chose from my favorite examples to put this building together. But the whole point was, at the end, you would have some sense of the kind of common sense that went in, and the logic that went into the construction of something like this. But none of it, of course, would have been possible without extraordinary faith. And I guess that's why I can sort of justify, showing these images to you today, because I think that what's missing is we need more cathedral builders, new cathedral builders, but not necessarily cathedral builders of religious structures, but cathedral builders who can somehow reconstruct centers of faith, faith in ourselves, faith in our society, faith in humanity, to actually get past the crap, and which is a term they never used in the Middle Ages, apparently, because you couldn't get past it. It was everywhere. And then the other thing, obviously, about this drawing is that there's been a leap of those 600 years. The jet trail was first, and then I, just last Thursday morning, added the car and the bicycle. Now, because in the program book it does say next to my name, health ideas, and you're probably trying to figure out, what the hell? Health ideas. Let me just say, eat regularly. Thank you.